Welcome. I'm Jason Mellard. I'm the director of the Center for Texas Music History. I want to start off by thanking our gracious hosts and partners at the Wittliff Collections for welcoming us into this beautiful space to celebrate 25 years of the Center for Texas Music History and its Journal of Texas Music History. So I just want to take a moment to mark the occasion and talk a little bit about why we're gathered here today and who is gathered here today. The Center for Texas Music History is a center of scholarship housed in the History Department dedicated to the study, preservation, and celebration of the rich and diverse musical history of the Lone Star State. We do that through all kinds of things. We have an annual Journal of Texas Music History that is a free subscription for the asking. We teach a range of undergraduate and graduate courses in Texas music history. We support a lot of those students through the Kent Finley and Tommy Foote scholarships. We have the This Week in Texas Music History radio shorts on KUT's Texas Standard. And we have a range of research projects and events all throughout the state. Our next one coming up before too long is the country music historians and performers Bill and Bobby Malone, who are joining us here today. We'll be hosting them at the Texas Music Museum in Austin on November 16th. Now, this is all work that I do not do alone. I have a team. First of all, my right-hand program coordinator, Avery Armstrong, and a music historian in her own right. A range of other professors and instructors, Alan Schaefer in English, lecturers Kim Simpson and Rich Kelly in history, as well as a range of history colleagues and those in the Center for the Study of the Southwest. So we are here today, though, to celebrate a moment of transition in one of the Center for Texas Music History's crown jewels, its book series with Texas A&M University Press, long overseen by recently retired editor-in-chief Tom Lemons. The very first book in that series was a volume by our founding director, Gary Hartman, The History of Texas Music. It came out way back in 2008. This book was inspired in part and builds upon a chapter that he had contributed to an edited collection from A&M Press a few years before called The Roots of Texas Music, compiled by archivist Joe Specht. And recently, yes, Joe Specht. I was holding the applause line, so we have a bigger applause line for him coming. So the dedicated fund that we had been using to underwrite this book series and the backers behind it had been winding to a natural close for a couple of years, and I was sitting over breakfast at Cisco's in Austin with Joe Specht one day, and since he had been someone who had been engaged with this series since its beginning, we now have over 24 books in that book series. We were saying how sad it would be if it had to come to a conclusion, but Joe Specht made a very generous gift that allows for this series to continue at Texas A&M for years to come. And Joe made the additional request that as we turn the page into this new chapter of the book series, that we name it in honor of our founding director and guiding light, Gary Hartman. So it is henceforth known as the Gary Hartman Series in Texas Music. Now, this, together with our new Tommy Foote Scholarship, opens up a new day for the center, and we are excited to launch a new sort of program for an endowment that will make sure that we will continue to be able to do these things for another quarter century. But for today's activities, while we're here today, thank you for letting me provide my gratitude to all of those folks who've made today possible. But this thing today that we're doing, it couldn't be much more poetic that the very first book in the Gary Hartman book series is the memoir and history of Tamara Saviano, author, documentarian, and a pillar of righteous Americana in the music industries of Nashville and Austin. Tamara's biography of Guy Clark was already one of the books that we were most proud of to produce in this book series, and we felt honored to help bring Poets and Dreamers to fruition. Many of these books are available here today, and Tamara will be around to sign those as well. So, today, Tamara and Gary Hartman are going to discuss her book, her career, her work, Americana, and I'm not going to spoil anything else in piling on with their introductions. They'll have that conversation to explore it on their own. But I do have one final and delightful task as MC. To help us set the stage for this talk of Americana, let's bring music up front to the fore. Joining us today for a few songs is celebrated singer-songwriter and friend and associate of Tamara Saviano, Brennan Lee.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. Okay. It was hard to decide what to play because I know you're a literary bunch, so in the spirit of the memoir, here's a few of mine that I wrote. And this one's a love song from my favorite part of the world, which appears to be beautifully edified all over this building. This is called Obsessed with the West. I'm obsessed with the West, that ruleless old gal, always coming or going. She can't be corralled. Her buzzing cicadas, her chalky white rocks, her high dancing grasses, her black buzzard flocks. I'm obsessed with the West, her tough leaning trees, her hawks on her high lines, her core reaching freeze, her murderous hailstorms, her squalls and cyclones, her blooming pink cactus, her weather bleached bones. Oh, it's her I can't keep from that old love affair, though she pelts me with sleet and ties knots in my hair. I'm obsessed with the West, that rugged old broad, that unbroke wild pony, that opus of God. Thank you. I'm going to do two more, and they're from an album that's kind of a memoir for me called Prairie Love Letter. When I first met Tamara, I know Tamara through Guy Clark, and she and I bonded over being from what we call the Midwest, originally, anyway. I think I might be from Texas now, but I wrote this one about my dad and his first time driving a tractor solo in about 1957, and this is called the John Deere H. I close my eyes in a wide blue sky spreading out before me, and I'm hearing that old engine crank again in all its glory. It's a faded memory that I go back to now and then. I give my right arm to be on that farm with the John Deere H again. The John Deere H was a roll crop tractor, ours was a 43, and I was still too young to drive, but I knew she was made for me. It'd be like heaven to start her up until that stubborn ground, but I'd climb up on the metal seat and make up my own tractor sounds like this. this. The H was made in a factory down in Waterloo, but my daddy got her secondhand from some folks that we knew. She wasn't sleek and she wasn't fast, took a while to get her going, but she beat a horse in a handheld plow for cutting hay and hoeing. And then to my surprise, he said one night, boy, it's time you got to learning, and he showed me how to check the spark and set that flywheel turning. I was only 8 years old, I had to stand to reach the pedals, but I was so proud you'd have thought that I just won some kind of medal. In the spring she pulled a corn planter in the newly thawed out ground, and at harvest time she'd help make hay before the fields turned brown. She cut alfalfa with a sickle mower, the sweet smell filled the sky, and in dreams at night we'd still be working the John Deere H&I. Well, that old machine was a farm kid's dream, none like her before or after, but we let her go in hopes of knowing so-called greener pastures. Though I've been around the world, my life's the envy of most men. I'd give my right hand for that piece of land and the John Deere H again. I give my right arm to be on that farm with the John Deere H again. Thank you so much. Well, it's a great honor to be here. Tamara sent me a text a few months ago and said, hey, I saw you're playing in Kerrville on Saturday of this event I'm doing, and it's a book release, and, you know, it's going to be easy for you to just come up. So anyway, the Kerrville thing got canceled, but she doesn't know this, but I would have driven all the way from Houston just to do this because I'm such a fan. I've read 2 of her other books, and I couldn't put them down. They derailed my entire day, or 2, both of them. So I'm very excited about this one, this book, and thank you for having me. Thank you all for listening. She also had requested this song of mine that I actually had to go back and review, so I hope I remember it, and if I don't remember it, that's all right, I guess. This one's for you, Tamara. Thanks. This is a song I wrote after reading an article about this lady from western North Dakota who was in her 80s and had to move because the oil boom drove inflation up and she couldn't afford her rent anymore. This is called You've Never Been to North Dakota. Have you ever seen a field alive with green? Thimbleweed and columbine and clover. Heard the black-billed magpie call as summer fades to fall. Watch the meadow turn to perfect white all over. I've lived here 80 years, and before it disappears, there are so many things I'd love to show you. Wondrous and serene, but if you don't know what I mean, then you've never been to North Dakota. Have you looked up and read the note Aurora Borealis wrote while you were gently sung to sleep by a coyote? Felt your joints get stiff and cold to let you know you're growing old. Till then you've never been to North Dakota. Well, I guess you've heard the news. The oil trucks coming through for a prairie moon. They don't care one iota. Stand on the Cheyenne River shore and watch a golden eagle soar. Till then you've never been green and white and yellow in the sunshine. Listen, hear the sharp-tailed grouse and watch the tiny meadow mouse. Smell the chilly wind come through the ponderosa pine. But a new crowd's come about and inflation pushed me out. So long, my friends, it's sure been good to know ya. They can drill for oil and stay, but no matter what they say, none of them have really been to North Dakota. Thank you so much.
Anyway, welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here. Man, it looks like almost a full house all the way back. We're so happy to have each and every one of you out. Special mention to Bill and Bobby Malone. Thank y'all for being here. Also, I would like to quickly thank everybody here at the Wittliff, David and Hector and Katie, and there are too many others to list, but they have done a great job. In fact, I was thinking of this, David. I think this was before you got here. We had the Center for Texas Music History had its coming out party here at the Wittliff, and you guys we've done so many great things together over the years, and we really appreciate all your support and everything that you've done. We have always enjoyed partnering with you guys, so thanks for that. Thanks also to Jason and Avery for running the Center for Texas Music History, keeping it going. Appreciate all that. And I'm gonna point out one person who doesn't want to be pointed out, but I told him, get ready. Joe Specht, would you stand up and say hi to the crowd, please?
Come on, Joe.
As Jason said earlier, Joe has been, he's been with us since day one. He's been a great friend and a good supporter. And when he found out that we were running out of funding for the book series that we've had going since 2008, Joe generously stepped up and pledged money for the next few years. And I skipped the part about the name of the series. Anyway, we're so thankful,
Hartman
Joe.
Series.
Yeah, I'll say that I am honored beyond words to have a book series named after me, but I don't understand it. I don't know what I did to deserve that honor, but I'll take it and run with it. But thank you, Joe, so much for all your support. Joe's also a music historian, and there are many times when I had to, excuse me, email you or call you and ask you a specific question about something I was working on, and you always knew. You always knew every little detail about everything. So thanks, Joe, for all of that.
Let's thank Gary again.
Yes.
Thanks, Joe.
And I am so proud that my book is the first in the series because Gary is the one that strongly suggested I write a book about Guy Clark and got me into this whole mess. So I'm really thrilled that my book is the first in the Gary Hartman series.
I told Tamara she'll never forgive me, but that's okay. I'm proud to be connected in any way with the excellent work that you've done, and this is another good example of your new book. Got it upside down. But there it is, and they'll have it for sale, and I think some other books for sale up at the front, I believe, near the entrance. So be sure and check that out when you get a chance. Tamara, you and I had to look this up, but you and I have known each other since 2006.
Wow, is that
almost
when we met?
20 years. I met you may not remember this, I met you when you brought Chris Christopherson to Austin for the Texas Heritage Songwriters
That's right.
Hall of Fame. And
Back when it was at
Hills Cafe,
Hills
yeah,
Cafe,
yeah.
wow, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where we first met, and then we began kind of communicating, and then I pestered you into writing a book about Guy Clark, and it just turned out marvelously, and you did a documentary film based on your work with Guy Clark.
Yep.
And Tamara I could go on endlessly about every award that Tamara has won. She's a Grammy-winning record producer. an award-winning author and documentary filmmaker. You were the first female president of the Americana Music Association, and on and on and on. But
All that tells you is that I'm old.
well, I'm still ahead of you there. So, but I'm delighted to have Tamara here. I consider Tamara a dear friend and
are dear
a major
friends, yes.
mover and shaker in the music world, even if you don't see it that way. Tamara has been so involved in so many different aspects of music, and you are one of the pioneers of the Americana Music Association. So you've done tons, a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, thinking back on that, in 1995, three guys, John Grimson, Rob Bleetstein, and Brad Paul, convinced the Gavin Report, which was a radio trade magazine, to start a new music chart for this thing called Americana, and it's really unusual. Usually the music comes first and then there's a radio chart. They started with the chart and then built the radio stations playing this kind of music. So this genre came to be in a very unusual way, and then 5 years later, the Americana Music Association formed. And it is a really interesting story. I had a lot of fun writing about it.
It's a fantastic story, and to hear it from someone who's on the very inside from the beginning is amazing. You and I were talking about this a few minutes ago, but in my mind, Americana has always kind of been out there. It's just that it didn't start to get organized until some of y'all, especially in Nashville, some folks in Austin, really decided there needs to be a real structure to support this type of music. And so
yeah, the music's been around forever. We can certainly talk about music that goes back, I think, to the 30s and 40s that we would consider Americana, but there was no business around it. The radio business, radio plays hit songs in every genre, and Americana is a radio format and a music genre that is really not comprised of hits. It's more, typically longer songs and more poetic lyrics, and it's not just verse, chorus, verse, chorus. So these guys that started the Americana chart, they wanted a radio home for these types of songs. And now when you see where it's come 30 years later from 1995 when they started the chart, now you just have to turn on, Sirius satellite radio, and you've got Outlaw Country and the Bluegrass Station and Willie Nelson and a whole bunch of other, country or folk stations that are all under the Americana umbrella. So it has been really satisfying to watch that happen over the last 30 years.
And I think that's one thing that, if you aren't familiar with Americana music, I think that's one thing that sets it apart from quote-unquote mainstream country, is there is more of an openness to all these other different influences, blues, jazz, swing, on and on and on. There are no limits, basically. And also, as you were saying, the emphasis is on artistic integrity and creating your own work. Some of you know this, and it may still go on. In fact, I think it does go on in Nashville and New York and LA, where you've got a building over here with songwriters cranking out songs, and then a studio down the street where someone else is going to sing your song, but it rarely would be the singer who wrote the song. And Americana, with people like Guy Clark and Chris Christopherson and many others, they changed the entire dynamic of that, and there's really sort of an expectation in Americana music that you create your own material, or most of your own material. It's okay to do someone else's song once in a while, but
yeah, Americana artists write their own music, play their own music, sing their own music. It's not and not that there's anything wrong with the whole pop music thing. I mean, I grew up on pop music and I love it, but it's typically, like you said, a group of songwriters in a room writing a song, and then a different singer sings it, and sometimes that singer doesn't even play an instrument, so it is a completely different art form.
well, it is. I think it's a change for the better. Not to get rid of mainstream music or say there's anything wrong with that, but I think it's so interesting and much richer to see a song created and then performed by the person who created it and others. So I think it's There's some great stuff out there. Tamara, I would like to ask you, well, I don't know, should we give a brief definition of what Americana music is?
There's no such thing as a brief definition.
Yeah,
of
well,
what
that's
Americana
true.
music is. No, and it depends who you ask. And I don't even try to define it in my book. I interviewed people and I would ask them. So there's a lot of different definitions in the book. But I think what we just talked about, roots-based artists that write their own songs, sing their own songs, play their own instruments. Or if you ask Emmylou Harris, she'll just say, weird music.
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's the beauty of it. There's not a rigid structure of any kind. It just has to be good. That's kind of the only requirement, and it's that much better if you wrote the song and you performed the song.
Well, and we just got to hear Brennan Lee, who's one of my favorite songwriters and performers. And, Brennan is a walking example of Americana music. So if you liked the 3 songs she did, go buy all her albums. They're all wonderful.
They are.
Yeah.
And what did Guy Clark say about Brennan?
That she plays guitar like a motherfucker and sings like an angel.
That's right. That's right.
He said it, not me. I'm just quoting him.
It's true. Well, Tamara, speaking of mainstream country versus Americana, first of all, how did you get involved in the music business in general, and then how did you transition over to Americana?
I started my career in radio in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is my hometown. And I worked for a radio station, a radio company, a small radio company that had a country station, a mainstream country station, and also what they used to call MOR, middle of the road. They don't even have that format anymore, but that was like Rosemary Clooney and Frank Sinatra. And this is before deregulation. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 kind of changed everything. But prior to that, radio was very local and very community-oriented. And so my job at the radio station was to publish magazines. I published a quarterly magazine for the country station and a quarterly magazine for the MOR station. And this is prior to the internet, so we also had an interactive phone system. So listeners could call in and leave a message on the interactive phone system, and then I would go through the messages at the end of the day, and then I would call back and leave messages for them. It was really, really cutting edge in 1990. But so I started my career there, and because we were a reporting station, which I talk about in the book, a reporting station means that the radio stations report what they're playing, their playlists, to charts. Billboard and R&R were the big charts back then. Gavin and Cashbox were smaller ones. The only remaining chart really is Billboard, that's in a magazine form. But because we were reporting to Billboard and R&R, our station was very important to the record labels. So anytime there was a new artist, the record labels brought them to perform in our conference room. So I saw Garth Brooks perform by himself in our little 10-person conference room. I saw, Susie Boggess, and I'm trying to think of who came through when I was there.
You interviewed one of our Texas State alumni, George Strait.
George Strait, I interviewed him on his bus at the Wisconsin State Fair, Willie and Waylon, and I mean, everybody came through. Milwaukee's a big market, so we had a lot of concerts. We have Summerfest, which is one of the biggest music festivals in the country, and we had the Wisconsin State Fair, and so I interviewed everybody. So that's how my career started. And then I got to be really good friends with Raul Malo, who's the lead singer of a group called the Mavericks. When the Mavericks, right before they signed to MCA Records, they were performing mostly in Miami, but for some reason they had a really big following in Chicago and Milwaukee. This is prior to them having a record deal. I don't know how that happened. But so a guy that ran the Rose Record Shop in Chicago, his name is John Leal, and I just knew him from the industry in Chicago and Milwaukee, and he called me one day, and he's like, I got to bring this band to the radio station. They don't have a deal yet, but they're so great. And so he brought the Mavericks to the station, and then I went to see them play at Whiskey River the next night in Chicago, and Raul and I just hit it off. This is in 91, 92. And we got to be really good friends. So every time the Mavericks came to town, Raul and I would go out after the show. We were young, so we'd go to the bars, close down the bars, and we'd go out to breakfast. So one of those late night breakfasts at 3 a.m. over pancakes and eggs, Raul said to me, "You should move to Nashville." And I was like, "Why would I do that? I have this great radio gig here. Why would I move to Nashville?" And he said that I was too creative to work in radio and that I would love Nashville. And I kind of blew him off, but that seed was planted. And then we'd talk about it every time I saw him. And the Mavericks were playing at least once a month up by us, so I saw him a lot. And so on August 1st, 1995, I moved to Nashville, and the first thing I did was go to Raul's 30th birthday party when I got there. So that's how long ago it was.
Nice entrance into the Nashville scene.
Yeah.
And do you feel that move to Nashville was part of your transition over to Americana?
Yes. Well, I didn't know what Americana was because that's the same year the chart started. But working in radio, I shared an office with the music director, and he would get, all the CDs from the labels would come in, and, his desk would just be piled high with, envelopes with CDs in them. And he'd open the CDs, and there would be like this running commentary. His name is Mitch. And he'd look at a CD and go, "Oh," and he'd throw it down on the floor in a corner. And the ones he was throwing in the corner are what we now call Americana. And I was retrieving them from the corner, like, why aren't we playing this? Why aren't we playing this? And so I built a hell of a great CD collection from, Uncle Tupelo and Wilco and Rosie Flores and Kevin Welch and Rodney Crowell and Guy Clark and Emmylou Harris. And I got all the, and because I worked at the radio station, I just took them home. They were mine now. So by the time I got to Nashville, one of the first people I met there was this guy named Billy Block, who I write about in the book. And Billy had started this Americana radio station in LA before he moved to Nashville. And then he hosted this Tuesday night show called Billy Block's Western Beat. And it was all the Americana artists that I love every Tuesday night at the place called the Sutler. So I got into it immediately. Like, I met Billy the day after I moved to Nashville. And then, the chart was going on, but then the organization started a few years later.
Well, that's something that I moved to Austin in 1974, and that was sort of the height of the progressive country thing, and I spent a lot of time going out to the Armadillo World Headquarters, Soap Creek Saloon, and hearing all this great music, and at the same time getting the sense that despite the amazing talent that was out performing on stages every night in Austin, there was not really any kind of infrastructure, business infrastructure to support them. And some people would break through. Willie, of course, he had done everything already anyway. And then occasionally there'd be someone else doing this, which really is essentially, it was Americana before that name was really out there.
They had these, different cities. Like in Austin, they would call it progressive country, and then somewhere else they would call it outlaw music. And so there were all these pockets, especially in the bigger cities, of a scene coming up, but nobody was calling it the same thing.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that I'd like to hear a little bit more about. One thing about Americana artists, they like to work independently, typically, and many of them do, most of them do, I would guess. But it seems to me that would make it much harder. If you sign up with a major label, you've got all this financial support, infrastructural support, but you're doing what the board of directors tells you to do, basically. And so if you're going to go down the more independent path of an Americana artist, you've got more creative freedom probably, but then you don't have that support. And I think that's part of what you and other people saw.
Right, and also at the same time that the chart was happening, there were these independent labels that were really gaining strength. There was Sugar Hill Records in Durham, North Carolina. There was Bloodshot Records in Chicago. There was Rounder Records in Boston. There were these labels that were putting out this music we now call Americana and having great success with it. So, there started being a label home. Then there were festivals that were primarily booking artists like this. Then there were clubs that were primarily booking artists like this. So there was this underground thing happening, but there was no business model to pull it all together. And once there was the Americana chart and the Americana Music Association, now you would have radio promoters that specialized in Americana. You would have publicists that specialized in Americana, artist managers. So there became this, and there still is, and it's much stronger, this network across the country and really in other countries as well. Australia and the UK and Ireland are really strong Americana markets, and France. So that started happening. And then what really blew the doors off was in 2000 when the Coen brothers made the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And they hired T-Bone Burnett to do the soundtrack. And that record sold millions and millions and millions of records. And they were, number one on the Americana chart. And it was such a phenomenon. And that really put Americana on the map.
And that's pretty amazing because most of the music on that soundtrack is really roots music, some of it going way, way, way back.
But radio wouldn't play it.
But radio
Country
wouldn't play
radio
it,
wouldn't play it.
yeah. So, I do get the sense that there were a lot of people in Nashville and elsewhere who wanted to do something besides follow the mainstream country route, but just didn't have an organization to support them.
Right,
or to be
right.
part of.
And, the CMA, the Country Music Association, when they started, it was the same thing. There weren't a lot of mainstream country stations way back then. And so they, built this business and built it from the ground up. And Americana, the people in Americana just did the same thing. There was a bunch of music business misfits, and they just got together and did it. And the first award show in 2002, we had Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash, and it was their last performance ever, So the things that, I look back on it now, because when you're just in it, when you're just doing it, it's just daily life, this is what's happening. And I look back now on those last 30 years, and it is really incredible what has happened.
It is amazing. Yeah, and I don't want to get sidetracked here, but I know you and I have talked about what it was like for you being a woman in such a male-dominated industry, especially in the early days. And I'm wondering how you navigated that, and have things improved in that regard, do you think?
No, they've gotten worse, quite frankly, which is sad. But I grew up in Wisconsin, and Midwesterners have a really, really strong work ethic. And I just decided that I was going to do whatever I wanted to do, and, I didn't need anybody's permission. And one thing I did notice about the South, this does not apply to Texas because you're all your own thing, but I noticed about the South that women often wait for permission to do things, and I was just like, yeah, I'm not waiting for anybody to tell me I can do it, I'm doing it, So it really didn't stymie me because I just kind of bulldozed over whatever I wanted to, So.
Do you think it affected the way you worked as the first female director of the Americana Music Association?
Yeah, well, being that, I was on the board. I think I was the third president and the first woman. But I was on the board, and I was really active, and I was running a lot of committees, and, and everybody was really busy. And so when, I got nominated at one of the board retreats, and I was just like, yeah, why not? Let's do this, And then I produced the first, 4 or 5 or 6 award shows at the Ryman. So I was really, really involved in those early years. And it was fun. It was just a lot of fun.
Well, I mentioned earlier that you have been recognized for so many different achievements. It would take forever to list them, but for me, one of the most interesting is when you won your first Grammy for the Stephen Foster tribute album. And to me, that album really exemplifies what Americana is all about, because Stephen Foster Interestingly, Stephen Foster wrote his songs to make money. He was a commercial songwriter. He didn't make much. In fact, he died in poverty, but that was more because there were no strict copyright laws, royalty laws, or anything
Right.
like that.
And he had a drinking problem,
And
which
he had a
really added
drinking
to
problem,
it.
too.
Yeah.
But the way you did that tribute album is you gathered such an eclectic group of artists to each perform a Stephen Foster song, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any of those CDs here today, but
I don't.
it's an amazing tribute album, and in a strange way, kind of links Stephen Foster to Americana music. I mean,
Yeah, and so I got to know Stephen Foster songs because I was lucky enough to have great-grandparents until I was 30, and they lived in my neighborhood. And my great-grandfather had this music box, but it was huge. It was called a Regina, and it played these big metal discs. And so he would play those discs for us, his great-grandchildren, all the time. And Beautiful Dreamer and My Old Kentucky Home, and, a lot of them were just Stephen Foster songs, no lyrics, just the melodies. But I really fell in love with Stephen Foster then. And when we decided to do the tribute album, we did it as a fundraiser for a nonprofit I started called American Roots Publishing because we wanted to publish Joe Ely's books. We were trying to raise money to publish Joe Ely's books, and we didn't really have any designs on a Grammy. In fact, none of us submitted it for a Grammy. And usually you have to go through this process where you submit it. So we found out later it was somebody, that was involved heavily on the Grammy board, loved the record so much that he submitted it. But yeah, we had John Prine on that record. We had Mavis Staples on that record. We had Raul Malo. We had Beth Nielsen Chapman. Gray Delisle, Alison Krauss, and Yo-Yo Ma. That was really fun, really fun.
it is amazing, and yeah, I don't want to get too far off on Stephen Foster, but before we move on to something else, to me, he's a great example of why you almost can't pigeonhole different genres of music. In fact, when you start trying to describe a genre of music, you can say, okay, well, that's country, and that's blues, and that's Tejano, or something like that. When you start to peel away the layers, it's much more complex underneath, and you'll see all these connections. They're all connected. And Stephen Foster was writing songs for a living, so essentially...
He was America's first professional songwriter.
Yeah, so a commercial songwriter, and his songs became so well known and so well loved across the country.
And there was no radio and no recorded music.
Yeah, it was just sheet music.
Yeah.
And his music was so well loved and shared by people moving to the West and everywhere else that it became folk music in the long run.
And when we were kids, like when I was kids, we sang Stephen Foster songs in school, but they stopped doing that during my daughter's generation in the 80s because of a lot of Stephen Foster songs were used in minstrels, and there became this racism thing, which is real, However, if you put Stephen in the context of his time, he was very progressive. He was the first person in song to refer to an African-American woman as a lady, and Nellie was a lady. He, fought against his publishing company for having blackface cartoons on his sheet music. Yes, it was absolutely racist that they did that, but Stephen himself was very progressive. So.
Well, just so you know, we're going to talk a few more minutes. We're not going to talk for a whole lot longer, and then we're going to have a Q&A and pass a microphone around for anyone who wants to ask a question. And then we'll wrap things up, and there are refreshments in the room next door. There are books for sale up near the entrance. And I would like to make sure that Tamara doesn't have to carry any books back home. How does that sound? Believe me, this book is...
I've got Scance. Scance is here to carry my books.
It is an incredible book, and I agree that you've written three. This is your third book to write, and they've all been excellent, but to me, they get better with each one.
Thank you.
And this one, even if you don't know anything about Americana, especially if you don't know anything about Americana, this is what you need to read. But it's so well written, and so it's chock full of information, but it's written in such an engaging way that it's like reading a good novel. And
Thank you, Gary.
that's what all of us who have written and published, we strive for that, but few of us achieve it. Tamara has. It's solid historical work, but fun to read and engaging. And you nailed it.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
I do want to ask you before we wrap up our conversation, how do you see the future of Americana?
I am the wrong person to ask.
Okay.
I really am, because I have not been engaged. Chris Christopherson, who I worked with for many years, he died last year, but he retired in 2020 when the pandemic hit, and I have not been engaged in what's happening going forward in Americana. So I really don't know. Yeah.
Well, I suspect that even if you are in the thick of things now, everything is changing so fast that
That's true.
it's hard to keep up with it anyway. But well, the last thing I'll ask you, and I think I know you pretty well after 20 years of being friends, I'm sure the last thing you can possibly think about doing is yet another project of some sort. But do you have any projects in mind?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a book right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very different for me. It's a stretch. There were 3 Wisconsin-based artists that met at the Chicago Institute of Art in 1940, and I'm writing about them. But I think it's it's going to be fictionalized because there's not enough information about them. So I'm imagining some of it, but I'm really enthralled with these 3 artists. So I'm working on that.
Is this part of that writing grant that you applied for, or is that?
I've been in this writing program called the Gateless Academy that Mary Gaucher, another great Americana artist, turned me on to. And yeah, it has really kick-started my creative juices in a way that has never happened before. I'm so enthralled with writing right now. It doesn't even feel like a chore, so I'm really having a good time. So yeah, I'm working on that.
Good. Well, for all of us who love your books, that gives us something to look forward to. That's wonderful. Tamara, do you have anything you want to say that we haven't covered, maybe?
No, but I'd love to answer any questions anybody has.
Let's open up the Q&A.
What's your favorite Guy Clark story?
Oh, my favorite Guy Clark story. Let's see. Can I tell you one where I got really mad at him? Is that all right? When I was working on the book, Verlin Thompson, the kindest man on the planet, and Guy and I were in the car. I was going to go on the road with them for, 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. And our first stop on our way from Nashville was Baton Rouge before we came to Texas. And Guy played at this place called the Red Dragon, which was kind of a glorified house concert. It was in this, warehouse with sofas and everything, really cool space. But it was run by volunteers. And Guy was notoriously hard on sound men. So there was a sound guy, but he's a volunteer. This is not really what he does for a living. And Guy can be intimidating, and this person was a little shy. And Guy just kept laying into him about the sound. And Verlin and I were looking at each other, and I was so stunned by Guy's behavior that I couldn't even react in the moment. I was just like, what is he doing? So we got through the sound check, and then had a little downtime, and then there was an opening act, and then Guy played, and then they had like this, jambalaya party after, and so it was pretty late when we got in the car to go to the hotel. And Verlin was driving, Guy was shotgun, I was sitting behind Verlin, and Guy looked back at me and he goes, well, what'd you think of the show, Tamara? And I said, I'm still not over the thing with the sound man. And he just goes, what do you mean? And I said, I cannot believe what an asshole you were to that guy. I'm not even sure I want to write a book about you anymore because I cannot believe how mean you were. That was so bad, Guy. That was so bad. And then Guy just turned around and didn't say another word, and we got back to the hotel. None of us said anything, went to our rooms. I was very upset. And the next morning, we get in the car to go, and Guy said, you know what, Tamara, you're right. That was really awful of me, and I'm really sorry. And I'm like, well, you're apologizing to the wrong person. So he called Chris Maxwell, the guy that ran the Red Dragon, got the sound guy's number and called him from the car and very sincerely apologized. And so I was very proud of him that he apologized. But that was just an example of guy being curmudgeonly guy.
And that's another thing I love about this book is those personal glimpses into artists like Guy Clark and Christopherson and many, many others that only someone in Tamara's position mostly could see some of that stuff.
I was lucky to be with those two guys for 20 years. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Jason, are you walking around with a microphone? Okay.
I think my voice carries.
Yeah.
Gary will tell you. Where's the Randall knife today?
The Randall knife is with Dylan Clark, Guy's grandson. Yeah. Travis had it, Guy's son Travis, and he died 18 months after Guy, and so then it was passed on to Dylan.
You mentioned the Sirius XM channels that cover Americana. Is there a reason there's not an Americana channel, and is there something we can do to bring that about?
I think that they thought Americana was too big of an umbrella, and I get that as a former radio person. You want to sort of zero in. So the outlaw country zeroes in on sort of that part of Americana, and, you know, folk alley zooms in on sort of that part of Americana, and the blues channel zeroes in on that. Chris Stapleton's channel, which is my favorite, he's kind of all over the map. So I call the Chris Stapleton channel the Americana Plus channel. I don't know if you've listened to that one, but I highly recommend it. Yeah, it's really good. Chris has excellent music taste. And then there, you know, the Willie channel, and that does more classic country, right? Yeah, I can't remember them all, but I think Americana was just too broad, and this way they can just play more music under those smaller umbrellas. Becky?
Out your playlist that goes with the book. Tamara's put together 150 songs. It's a fabulous playlist. Poets and Dreamers. It's on Spotify, so I recommend it to everybody.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, I was putting together a playlist just for fun, and there were just too many songs, so I just stopped at 150. I could have kept going, but.
The book is great, by the way.
Thank you.
And part of the book, Chris Christopherson was being interviewed, and you were off camera, microphone, and he looks over and says, "Wait, we have to stop. Tamara's making her ooh face. Show us your ooh face."
Yeah, the Chris was, Chris was a sex symbol back in the day, but by the time I met him, he was 65, and he's, he's older than my dad, and so I never looked at him that way. But women would just fall all over him, and I was always like, oh, yeah. Yeah, he got a kick out of it.
I remember when Chris played at that Texas Heritage Songwriters Association event that we had, and that's where we met. I didn't witness this, but you told me about it later, that you're trying to get him out to the car, and women were pulling your hair out of his head and stuff like that. So.
We always got mobbed, yeah. It was funny. I mean, it was like, are you kidding? I mean, look at him,
Another thing really interesting for me from your books and talking to you is you describe Chris as someone who's kind of mystified by why everybody made a fuss over him.
He was just as mystified as me. Yep, absolutely.
But a hell of a songwriter. I remember the first time I heard Chris.
And I joke. I mean, he is the most lovely human. I adored him. Absolutely adored him. Yeah.
We have one back here.
Can you touch upon why you think things are worse for women in your industry? Right
Well,
now than
I should
30
be
years
clear
ago?
that they're worse in Nashville. My friend Lindsay, who's here, we were just having this discussion yesterday. Yet another woman who was running a record label got let go, and they have any women that tend to get in power positions in Nashville, they find a way to, get rid of them. It's still very much a good old boy network, and it has become almost like a badge of honor to not have women in power positions there. I don't see that in other places, but in Nashville particularly, it's really too bad.
That is too bad. I had on my short list of questions, what would you advise a young person today about going into the music business, and specifically Americana, I guess?
Well, I think, it's hard to give advice to young people now because no one knows what tomorrow's going to look like. Spotify has decimated the music business. People can't make a living the way they once could. There used to be a really strong music business where there were a lot of like middle-class artists that were making, you might not know their name, but they could sell records and tour and really make a middle-class living, and that's just getting harder and harder and harder. So my only advice is only do it if you can absolutely not do anything else, if you cannot imagine your life without it. If writing songs and traveling in a van and getting on a stage to sing is the only thing you can imagine yourself doing, then yeah, do it. But
Well, that's good advice, and I think about, I've heard people say, priority number one is marry someone who's got a good job with good health benefits and who will let you go at night and play in clubs. So
yeah. How do you make $1 million in the music industry? Spend $2.
Yeah. Other questions?
I have a question about when older, okay. Evidently mine isn't big enough. When older people like Johnny Cash or Emmylou Harris, it's hard to become people that are played in Americana, but they're not, they started off as popular artists.
Yes.
That weren't singer-songwriters like Willie Nelson. So how does, what about those people that they don't have a radio home?
Right. Well, and that's part of the reason that those three men started the Americana radio chart, was because Johnny Cash got dropped from Columbia Records in the 1980s. I mean, who drops Johnny Cash? That's just stupid, right? And Emmylou wasn't getting played anymore. And Rodney Crowell, who really had a moment in the 80s on mainstream country radio, was, he was one of the ones that his CDs would land in the pile on my radio office partner's floor because it was like, he's over. So the guys that started this chart was like, these people are still creating. They're still making new music. They're still out there touring. They are not over. And so part of it was to find a home for those, legendary artists and bring up the next generations. So yeah, even though Emmy hasn't written many of her songs, she's just undeniable, and Cash too. So yeah, they definitely formed it to provide a home for those people, Bobby.
I suspect part of what happens, since record sales aren't reliable anymore, is you just have to tour more. You have to perform and tour, and that's not easy.
And plus, after the pandemic, a lot of venues are struggling. So it's a business-wide problem. It really is. I don't have any answers. I wish I did.
I'm sure AI will solve all that.
Oh my God.
Make everything perfect again. Any other questions? Jeffrey? Is that Jeffrey? Yeah.
Yes. So love the book and love the film.
Thank
and
you.
I was around when you were making the film. And curious if that film process changed your process as you went back to writing your next book, if it influenced it in any way.
That's hard to say. I was so relieved that I'd never had to make a film again. And I was so happy to be back to writing books. So it might have influenced me just that I could put that behind me and never have to think about it again. Because I made one film, but I will never make another. So, yeah.
It's a great film, though. If you ever get to see it, it's.
I made one good one.
Won at least one award. It won an award.
It won the Lewis Black Lone Star Award at South by Southwest.
South by, yeah. That's right.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. I'm very proud of the film. I'm really glad we did it, but I'm just not the filmmaker type. I'm the sit in a room by myself writing type.
One thing that I truly love about that documentary about Guy Clark, it's really through the eyes of Susanna Clark.
Yes,
In fact,
that was very intentional, yeah.
You got
Sissy Spacek.
Sissy Spacek to narrate
Yeah.
the film, speaking as Susanna Clark. And it's excellence, like everything you do is top quality.
Well, thank you.
Well, any other question? Okay, I see.
Oh, Diana as the last question.
All right, Diana.
Since you're talking about the documentary, is it still available for purchase?
Yeah, you can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on Amazon and Tubi. Those are the ones I know about. I think it might be available some other places, but yeah, it's easy. It's pretty easy to find. It's called Without Getting Killed or Caught.
Jason, is it time to wrap it up?
I think it's about time
Okay.
to wrap it up. We will have book sales and signing. Time for further conversation. Oh, was there one more question on this side here?
I would like to make a statement, not ask a question. A lot of you know this. Susan Spa, Guy's first wife, taught Sissy Spacek how to fingertip in Quitman, Texas.
Yes.
Sissy stars as Bill's mom in Raggedy Man. If you haven't seen it recently,
Great film.
see it again, and then she's the voice of Susanna. So Sissy wraps it up in a nice little note.
Yeah, she's amazing, Sissy Spacek. We were so lucky to have her. Man, that was great. That was fun.
What a great history nugget to wrap up our event. So thank you all again for coming out. Thank you to
Thank
the
you, everybody.
Wittliff for hosting us. Thank you to Brennan for the music. And thank you to Gary and Tamara.